And we are live with today's N10-008 Network Plus Study Group. It is the pre-show, everybody. We are getting things ready, popping out the chat room, moving things around on the screens, making sure the cameras are working, making sure the stream is up. Everything looks really good. Hi, everybody. Hope you're doing well. We'll get started here in about 9.5 minutes. In the meantime, we'll be checking in, making sure everybody can connect to the Q&A. There's the link on the screen, so at least you have that available. We've got lots of things to go through. Hey, chat room, how's everybody doing? Thanks for being here. We've got folks checking in from all over the place. Oh, there's a lot to do today. I've got all new questions. I was kind of behind with the question writing process. I didn't get it done until yesterday. Normally, it's done a week before. Normally, I forget the questions. Not today. I remember the questions for today, for sure. All right. Got some folks checking in. Thanks for being here, chat room. Thanks for stopping by. Mr. J in the chat room says, thank you for your help. Officially SY0701 certified. Got your Security Plus. Congratulations. That is great news. Always like to hear those stories. Good job on the hard work and the successful certification. It's always a good one to have in your pocket is the Security Plus. All right. Let's see what else we can do with our security. It's all Network Plus today. Folks already checking in on the map. You kind of see the map over my shoulder here where people are checking in. You can put your virtual dot, your virtual pin into the map by following the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. So we'll see. We will see. Lot to do here. So hopefully you can get some things going there. I don't know why you're having a problem with lag, but it could be related to YouTube server. Remember, I'm not sending you the video or the audio. YouTube is. So they are packaging it up and sending it to you. And if you could see here, up above my shoulder, as long as we're at 3%, we are sending a max amount of bandwidth out. So we're in good shape here from a video perspective. In fact, YouTube tells me, you can't really see it here, but there's a green excellent on my screen, which tells me the stream is going extremely well. So if you're having problems with lag, it's probably related to the server that YouTube is using to send you the video. And you could always adjust the cog wheels to make it a little bit better for you. Maybe you take it down to 720p or 480, depending on what's going on. Other questions in the chat room. Where's the donate button? Don't have a donate button. We don't take donations, at least not overtly. I mean, if you wanted to send me a check, I guess I would take it. But what's a check? That's a different story. That's a different question for another time. The key, though, is that there's no donate button. There's no super chat button. There's no super thanks button. I just got rid of them. It was just, it was unnecessary. Well, it wasn't unnecessary. It's a bad way to put it. I would rather this be something where I'm not constantly asking or expecting you to donate to keep things going. I think there's a better way to do this. So I just said, forget it. If you're watching the videos, you are contributing. If you are buying the course notes, you are contributing. It's not a donation. It is me creating content that can help you get a certification. So that's what that's about. So you can take that as it is, but you don't have to donate. I don't want to say I don't want your donation, but that's not what I'm doing this for, is for you to donate. We've got great materials to help with your studies. That would be a good investment. I think an investment is that's really the focus here. I would rather you be invested into your future, that you make decisions on the study materials and the tools that you need to get certified, instead of having this expectation that the only way to contribute or keep things going is through donations, which is definitely not the case. So I would prefer that be our way of doing things. And maybe that works out, maybe it doesn't. Maybe next week I'll turn the donation button back on. Well, maybe I'm completely wrong with this. Maybe I haven't thought this through yet. What was I thinking? And we turn it all back on. I'm always that way. So I always leave a little bit of an opening. Never say never, right? But right now I don't have any plans to do that. You can go out to get vouchers on my site. You can get course notes. You can get other things. So that's the plan. That's the idea. You shouldn't have to worry so much about donation. And I don't want to expect or want to expect that is coming either. I don't think that's just not a great way to run a business. It's not a great way to have a successful ongoing way to do things is hoping that people will send me a donation. I just don't think that's a good way to do it. So we won't. So far, so good. We'll see how things go. Like I said, next month may be a completely different story from me. What happened to all the we don't need to donate? No, I don't think that's the case. I don't think we'll be doing that. Lots of folks checking in. Thanks for being here. We got about 4 minutes until the live stream starts. This is not the live stream. This is just the pre-show where I'm checking cameras. I'm making sure audio is good, and it is. You can see it going there. Barely into the red. Every once in a while in the red. That's about how it should be. And things are looking great on the streaming side. All the numbers look fantastic. The video looks okay. Other than me being in the frame, the video looks great. That's the real key. All right. We got lots to go through today. All new questions, though. Got all my questions done for Network Plus, so that's good. Got a few things going on there. Here's a question in the chat room from GFM. Says, as someone working in a help desk network analyst for almost 5 years, how many days, months should I study for the A+ test? Well, not knowing what you know, it will probably go faster than the average. Most A+ exams, it takes about 2 to 3 months. But if you already have practical experience, especially as a network analyst, you may be able to shrink that down. Remember, of course, that network analyst positions don't necessarily correlate back to the A+ exam objectives. However, as a network analyst, you spend a lot of time switching, routing, protocol analysis, but you don't spend a lot of time on hardware, motherboard configurations. You might not even spend a lot of time in Windows. You may be running everything in Mac OS. So those are the things you have to worry about when you are thinking about taking the A+ exam. Grab the exam objectives for A+, the Core 1 and the Core 2, and just go through them. See how many things you can check off as, yep, I know what that is, and I could explain it to somebody. And as the more of those you check off, the more ready you're going to be. That is ultimately the best barometer, is the exam objectives and checking off what you believe you understand. And if you don't, you can circle those things, go back to the videos, go back to the other things. Any plans on the Network Plus practice exam? I would love to get a Network Plus practice exam done. We'll talk a little bit about what's happening with Network Plus over the coming months, and there is a small opening for that. So we'll have to see what happens with that. Some work has already been done. Oh, that's exciting, on a Network Plus practice exam. So that's always good. And it's my practice exam, not just a practice exam. It's the same format, the same structure as the A+ and the Security Plus. I think those are a good format, so we're sticking with it. Got about a minute and a half before we get started. I can't say just in time probably is a bad way to put it. I never said one was actually going to be released or when. I just said, yeah, we're working on things. And that's about it. So I don't know. Question, why CompTIA test out performance-based certifications not widely recognized by companies? I have no idea. I look at the things that employers are looking for in their job postings, and I see a lot of A+. I don't see a lot of test out, but I do see a lot of A+. Test out really never got traction. And of course, test out was bought by CompTIA. So that's it. What will we be doing today? Well, after this, I'll probably create the podcast audio. We'll upload that. Maybe work a little bit on a new course. Probably have a cold drink. Take a short walk, maybe. I don't know. What will we be doing today? What will you be doing today? Be good for this too. So we'll have to see. Lots to go through. All right, less than a minute to go. Let's make sure things look good here. They do. Everything looks really, really good. We don't need the key up there. We could probably put me there. There we go. I'm all over. Look at how much people have to see of me. Sorry about that. We'll figure it out. You know, Coca-Cola. It's what we have here in the South. Cold drink. We have Coca-Cola. You want Coca-Cola? Now, that could be anything. We just call it Coca-Cola. That's what it is. Florida's 3 states. There's not just one state here. There's 3 states here. 12 noon, straight up. Let's see if I can get the keynote working. Green light. Yep, green light. That looks good. That looks good. This looks good. I think it's about time for a live stream. Why don't we do one? Here we go. Do I mean Coca-Cola? Well, if I was somewhere else, it would be Coca-Cola, but I need Coca-Cola. We'll have to have a discussion later on in the after show. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the April 2024 Professor Messer N10-008 Network Plus Study Group. This is the study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. And hopefully this is something that you're able to follow along with us. And if you are here live, you are able also to contribute live. We have questions waiting for you in the live stream. And in fact, we've got a lot that we have already set up for you. Brand new questions every month. And of course, I have all brand new questions for you today as well. If you are here live and you would like to participate with us, we would love it if you could join us. You can simply pop open a new browser window and type in professormesser.com/QA. And that will take you to our Q&A. That is where we will be taking questions. Now, if you aren't watching this live, if this is on a replay, well, that's fine too. We've got plenty of things for you to follow along with, even if you're watching this on a replay. For example, if you are able to go to professormesser.com/QA, you will see a question waiting for you there. The rules with our questions, of course, is please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Your first question of the day asks, a Linux administrator needs to view the Ethernet adapter address settings on a database server. Which of the following would provide this information? Would it be IP, netstat, route, ping, or nmap? There's a lot going on here. A Linux administrator needs to view the Ethernet adapter address settings on a database server. Which of the following would provide this information? Would it be IP, netstat, route, ping, or nmap? Now, if you know the answer, as I mentioned, you can't really watch see the answers on the screen. We don't want to put answers in the chat room. Instead, follow the link that is on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. And we're going to come back to that question in just a bit. Well, let's talk about what we are doing today. It's our study group. This is where I put together a bunch of questions and we see how well we do. In the second hour, we have what is loosely called our study group after show, where you get to ask me questions. And in fact, if you are on our live stream right now, you can submit your questions from that same QA link. So if you go to professormesser.com/QA, there is a link at the top of the screen. There's some tabs, and you can submit any question you would like for the after show. In the meantime, you can always find us on social media. Simply type in professormesser.com/ the name of the site you'd like to find us on. So /Twitter, /Facebook, /YouTube, /Instagram, /LinkedIn, and so on. And of course, if you do go to Twitter or Instagram, you will certainly be able to find our weekly Network Plus Pop Quiz question. We also have our YouTube channel where we have all of our videos. You can go to professormesser.com/YouTube, especially if you would be interested in subscribing to our channel, which would be really nice thing for you to do. If you're considering helping, that would be a fantastic way to help the things that we are doing here. I want to talk to you about Network Plus, though. It's been an interesting month for Network Plus news. And of course, we do have some new news about Network Plus. The current Network Plus version, the one that you could take right now and pass to earn your Network Plus certification, the version of that exam is called the N10-008. This was an exam version that was released in September 15th of 2021. And alas, this exam will be retired on December the 20th of this year. Now, we're sitting here in April. There is plenty of time for you to get through all of the exam requirements well before December. On average, it probably takes most people about 2 to 3 months to complete their studies for Network Plus. So just keep those dates in mind as we are getting closer to the end of the year. And of course, I will keep you updated each month as we discuss this on our study groups. The exam itself is a 90-minute exam. You can get a maximum of 90 questions. The score you're hoping to get is a score of 720, and it's on a scale between 100 and 900. The exam itself is mostly multiple choice questions, but there are a number of performance-based questions as well. And we'll talk a bit in just a little that we'll talk about what those performance-based questions happen to be. In fact, I have a performance-based question for you coming up very, very shortly. So that is the current state of Network Plus. CompTIA, though, has announced that a new version of Network Plus will be coming out. I guess you could guess that already, considering that they would be retiring this version in December. A new version will be available, and not surprisingly, it will be the N10-009. It's got a 9 on the end instead of an 8. They incremented by 1. This is released or was scheduled to release on June the 20th of 2024. So as we sit here at the end of April or middle of April, we've got May, June. You've got about 2 months before that version is released. Really, that still gives you plenty of time to work towards passing your Network Plus exam today with the current version. This version of 009, once it's released in June, will stick around probably until the fourth quarter of 2027. So you've got plenty of time once we make that transition. What's interesting about the newer version and the old version is that from a grading perspective and a number of questions perspective, they are identical. 90 minutes long, a max of 90 questions, same score, same scale, same type of questions, same structure. Everything's the same, except the questions will be slightly different because the exam objectives will be slightly different. And those objectives, I believe, are available now on the CompTIA website. And if they aren't, they will be shortly. The real question that comes up when we talk about these new exam versions coming up is that a lot of people say, I'll just wait for the new one. I'll wait until a new exam is released, and I'll take the new one because it's newer, I guess, because it's shiny and we haven't seen it before and it's newer, so it must be better, right? Well, I guess there's some truth to that, but only very little truth. In fact, there's probably more negatives to doing that than there are positives. Everybody who's working on earning their Network Plus certification right now appreciates you waiting, because you will not be competing with them for these jobs because they will have their Network Plus certification and you will not. I always tell you that you should never wait to take a certification exam. You need to earn that certification, put it in your pocket, and start using it immediately. So don't wait for an exam to start studying. Another problem you're going to run into is there's very limited study materials available on the first day of an exam. So although the exam will be available on June the 20th of 2024, there's not going to be a lot of books. There will be limited video courses. There'll be limited study materials in general. So it immediately puts you at a disadvantage. In fact, you might even after June the 20th, you might still prefer taking the N10-008. It's completely up to you, of course, but there are different options. You need to check to see what study materials are available when you're ready to sit down and take the exam. Just some things to think about as you're going through and deciding which version of this exam you would like to take. Of course, we will have study materials not only for the N10-008, but the N10-009 when it is released. Of course, currently we have our N10-008 course notes, our success bundle, our downloadable videos, our audio course, and much more on our website. You can find out about that at professormesser.com/netsuccess, or simply follow the menus at the top of the Professor Messer website. This live stream will be available for replay immediately after we are done on YouTube, so you can watch the video replay as soon as we hit the stop button on our side. But there's also an audio-only version that is distributed in podcast format. I put that together and usually publish it within 24 hours of a live stream. And you can find that at professormesser.com/podcast. So if you prefer a podcast listening program up to a YouTube channel, you can do that, especially if you're driving, you're working out, you can't really watch a video. This is a very low bandwidth and easy way to keep track of the things that we do on our live stream. Again, you can find out about this study group along with any of our others at the link on your screen, professormesser.com/podcast. Another thing you'll notice on the YouTube side, the YouTube replay in the YouTube video description will suddenly, almost like magic, have all of these timestamps listed in the description. This allows you to jump directly to a question or directly to an answer, and it makes things move a little bit faster if you're watching it on the replay. These don't happen automatically. I've seen that the alleged AI has tried to take these things and automatically do it. Turns out the AI is a lot of A and not much I. Fortunately, we have humans that are much better at doing this, specifically my marketing manager, Lori. Hey, Lori. She's watching this on the replay, probably at 2x speed, and she is putting in these timestamps for you. So if you appreciate that, we'd love it. She's watching the chat room replay as well. Give Lori a hello and a thanks if that's something that you like. Maybe this is something that you can go back even years to reference, so it might come in handy as you work through your Network Plus studies. We've got a lot of other things on our site. We're not doing a live stream. I'm usually hanging out in our Discord. This is a great community of people who are busy studying for their A+, their Network Plus, their Security Plus certification, and others. And if you're someone who would like to maybe study with other people, there's a way that you could open up your own study room ad hoc in the Discord. You can start a live stream. You can start an audio-only live event, and then you can manage it on our Discord. We give you the controls so that you can decide who comes in. You can kick people out of your room. You can lock it down. You can make it public. You can make this study work however you would like. It's a great way to do that. So if you're someone who is looking to study with others, we have such a great community here. We'd love for you to join. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/Discord. Also, eventually, you're going to need to take your Network Plus exam. We do offer discounted vouchers if you live in the U.S., Canada, or a U.S. territory. And those discounted vouchers are available on our site at ProfessorMesser.com/vouchers. Not only do you get a voucher at a discounted price, so you're not paying full price that you would have to pay over on the CompTIA website, you also get more content that's not available anywhere else. It's my exclusive CompTIA Exam Hacks ebook that I've listed out the tips and tricks that I've accumulated through the years that help me with my study process. I even give you some tips and tricks that can help you during your exam. So use the exam to get you more points on your final score. There are ways to do this, and I list these in my Exam Hacks ebook. That's available for free. It's a book you can't buy. It is only available with my Success Bundle and if you purchase a discounted voucher. That's at ProfessorMesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to that question we asked earlier, which is, a Linux administrator needs to view the Ethernet adapter address settings on a database server. Which of the following would provide this information? Would it be IP, netstat, route, ping, or nmap? 5 choices there. Let's see what you chose on this list. We can see that 49% of you say the answer is IP. 30% say it's netstat. We have 14% that say nmap is what you would use. 4% say route, and less than 1% said ping. Well, if you want to view information about the Ethernet adapter, this is the hardware that's inside of a server. In this case, a database server. It could be inside of a workstation, a laptop. You want to see what is the MAC address of this adapter? What is the IP address that has been assigned to this adapter? What's the subnet mask? What are our default gateways? What are the IPv4 and IPv6 addresses associated with this adapter? All of that information is contained within a series of utilities depending on the operating system that you're using. But this might be ipconfig, it might be ifconfig, or in the case of the latest versions of Linux and Mac OS, it could also simply be the IP command. It's a great way to view information about the hardware that's inside of your system and the addresses that are assigned to that hardware. So for ipconfig is what you would use if you were at the Windows command prompt. Ifconfig works across pretty much every Linux distribution, and newer distributions use the IP command. So IP address, for example, that is the command, IP space address. That will show you the IP information on those particular adapters. So this is a great way to, when you first sit down at a machine, you're trying to troubleshoot, your first question might be, what's the IP address of this device? What is the default gateway that this device is using? And can I ping both of those? Well, the one good way to gather that information is to use the IP command to be able to see what those happen to be. And in fact, 49% of you said that's exactly what you would use is the IP command. You got it absolutely right. Now, 30% of you say the netstat command would be the best way to view this. Netstat will certainly show you all of the outgoing communication and the incoming communication to this device. but it will only show you that if there actually is incoming and outgoing information to this device. And even then, we're not exactly sure if that IP address is associated with the device that is local in front of you, or if there are other maybe virtual IP addresses associated with this server. So it's really not a great way to determine an IP address. And if you're not connected to the internet or there's no traffic going out to the network, then the netstack command isn't going to show you anything. So not always the best choice. And in fact, when your other choices on the screen are things like IP, that is clearly the one that is always 100% of the time going to show you the IP address and configuration information for the Ethernet adapter. The Nmap is what many people chose. 15% of you chose Nmap. Nmap is great for scanning a device across the network and determining the IP address, the ports that are open. We can even dive into more details about what operating system might be running on that device and the version of services that are running on that device. But it will not tell you Ethernet adapter address settings on a device that is located across the network. It's certainly not easily to be able to do that. In some cases, won't tell you anything at all. There may be a firewall set up on that device that doesn't allow Nmap to show any of those details. And ultimately, we want to get into more configuration details of the adapter. Nmap won't show you that. You need to go to the operating system to see those, and the IP command will show you that information. And then we have the route command, which shows us a lot about the IP routes the system will use, but it doesn't tell us anything about the adapter settings. And the ping command, that's not used at all to show us anything about an Ethernet adapter setting. We certainly can't gather much information from ping. The best answer here, and the one that shows you everything, is here, the IP command. 49% of you got that one absolutely right. This was our rewind question from last month. So for those of you that were watching last month, I bet a lot of you already remembered this one because I think we did a lot better on this question this time around. So going forward now, in the rest of the study group, we all have brand new questions for you. And the first brand new question I'd like to give you each month is a performance-based question. Performance-based questions are questions that are anything but multiple choice. So this might be a question that has a drag and drop. It might be a fill in the blank. It might be a question that asks you to put things in a particular order. Maybe it's a matching question. The important part to remember with these performance-based questions, though, is that these questions are coming directly from the exam objectives. If you know your exam objectives, it really doesn't matter how they ask the questions. You will be able to answer the questions in front of you. And I have a relatively straightforward performance-based question for you this month. Our question asks, assign a wire color to each pin. And you can see on your screen is a T568A specification and what appears to be an RJ45 connector. So we have 8 pins there, and I want you to wire this with the T568A specification. What colors would they be? It's a fill-in-the-blank question. So if you think you know the answer to this one, please no answers in the chat room. You want to follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to be able to tell me through pins 1 through 8 what colors go there for that specific config. Now, for those of you that are following this, you've already tracked through a lot of the things that we need. The T568A is also combined with a T568B color specification. So maybe as a hint for you, there are only 2 specifications that you really need to choose from, the A and the B. And of course, here I'm asking you for the A. So see how you do with this question. This is one that you will be using a lot, especially if you start to create your own patch cables. And even if you don't create your own patch cables, you may run into a scenario where you have a 100-meter run that is going into a server and you're having a problem with this connection and you realize one of the connectors is failing or is pulling out. You may need to correct that on the fly. You may be asked to recrimp a connector onto the end of that cable. And they're going to tell you, oh, and this is wired as T568A on the other side. You should also make it, of course, the same thing on both sides of the cable. So it should also be T568A on this one. So now we need to create this cable. And it's true, and folks in the chat room are even mentioning this. Once you create and build your own cables, you kind of mess up the first few. You put it on wrong, you crimp it, oh, you missed a wire, you cut it off again, you pull the cables out again, you untwist them again, you put the connector back on, you try to crimp it again. Well, you missed the cables, the wires are in the wrong place, but eventually, after 3 or 4 times, you get it, and it goes on there and it works. And then you start realizing, you start remembering what those colors happen to be. So if you're busy memorizing these now, just know that eventually you'll be doing this with actual cables. And after the 3rd or 4th one, you just remember. It becomes really, really easy to be able to make that happen. So maybe you know the answer to this one as well. A number of people are putting this in. No cheating. Don't go to the Google to find the answer. This is one you probably could Google pretty easily. But of course, during your exam, you can't use Google. What? Is it true? Yes, it's true. You can't use Google during an exam. So make sure that you understand what the answer to this might be so that if you get this on an actual exam, you will be able to troubleshoot, analyze, or understand a T568A. And I will tell you, also helpful if you know what a T568B is wired for. So let's step through the answer to this one. We're not going to wait any longer for this one. Let's assign a wire color to each one of these pins. Let's start by just looking at what a T568A cable is wired with. These are the wires for pins 1 through pins 8. So you can see in here that we have different colors of cables. They are primarily green, orange, blue, and brown. And you can see there is a mix of different cables where you have some that are a solid and some that are striped. So that's an easy way to keep track of solids and stripes. So a solid and stripe green, a solid and stripe orange, a solid and stripe blue, and a solid and stripe brown. So for the T568A standard, which specifies what colors connect to what pins, you can see the colors on your screen here. So we have on pin 1 is a striped green. On pin 2 is a solid green. Pin 3 is a striped orange. Pin 4 is a solid blue. Pin 5 is a striped blue. Pin 6 is a solid orange. And pin 7 is a striped brown. And pin 8 is a solid brown. This can be a bit of a challenge, of course, if you are someone who is trying to go through the process of memorizing this, but you are also having a challenge being able to see colors. Someone who is colorblind, this might be a bit of a challenge. So it may take a little bit more work to figure out which color goes where in that scenario. I have family members that have color blindness, so I'm very sensitive to that. I understand the challenges when dealing with that. This is a really good thing to use if you're matching up T568A on one side. You want to be sure that you have T568A on the other side. But as I mentioned earlier, there is another coloring standard, because why would you have just one, right? Well, that's because there are a number of different reasons why we created these two standards, but it's primarily based on what was already existing and implemented on a number of networks, primarily government type networks, but doesn't have to be. These days, it seems almost everywhere you go, they're using T568B. And that's usually what you'll run into. You'll walk into the door of an organization and you'll ask them, which wiring scheme do you use? Because we need to punch down some cables. We need to go to a punch down block. We need to put them, we have one end of a connector that we're putting into the wall. Do we use A or B? And then we get to choose that and make sure we punch it down with the right one. But if you're using 568B, the colors are slightly different. They're half different. That's the challenge. And that's because the colors that stay in place are the blue and the brown. Notice that pin 4, solid blue on A, pin 4, solid blue on B. Pin 5, striped blue, pin 5, striped blue. Pin 7, striped brown, pin 7, striped brown, and pin 8, solid brown, pin 8, solid brown. So the blue and the brown, pins 4, 5, 7, and 8, they never change. So when you're having to memorize this, that's one less thing you have to worry about. Pins 4 and 5 and 7 and 8 will always be the same. So that should certainly help. Now that also means that you're able to now simply switch the green and the orange. And you can see that's exactly what has happened between the A and the B. Pins 1 and 2 are the striped green and green. Pins 1 and 2 on B are striped orange and orange. So that is the difference, is we're simply moving the orange and the green between the two different versions. You, of course, need to know which one goes with which standard, but those are the differences between those. And as I mentioned in my live stream, and I look forward to your cards and letters, do not put 568A on one side and 568B on the other side of a cable. That's not going to provide you with gigabit throughput. In fact, you'll never get gigabit capabilities. It will only come up at 100 megabit and sometimes won't even connect at all, depending on the chipset of Ethernet that's running on the devices. You'll read a lot of books and you'll see a lot of things on the internet that say that's perfectly fine to put A on one side and B on the other side. I would recommend you do it and tell me what happens. That's the only response I can really tell people, is you can believe the third-party odd site that tells you it's perfectly fine. What happens when you do it? When you plug those in? Tell me what type of gigabit speed you're getting, which would be not getting gigabit speeds. You'll be going at 100 megabit. You'll never go at a gigabit if you do that. And in fact, if you look at the standards for these two, you'll know that it's just referring to colors. It's not referring to connectivity. That's the important part. This is all about colors. If you look at my video on copper cabling, I show these and you can see these a lot better, where the blue and the brown stay in one single place. The only thing that changes is the orange and the green. So if you are someone who put into your T568A that pins 1 are white and green, you have white and orange, blue, white and blue, orange, white and brown. Those are the standards for 568A. Make sure you're familiar with all of those colors. They could possibly come up on your exam. CompTIA loves to ask about those, so make sure that you're familiar with those. And even if they don't ask you on the exam, it will be very useful if you're someone who is working through and trying to understand how to crimp these wires that you need to get this system up and running. And if you need more details, you can, of course, have a look at the video in section 1.3 from our N10-008 course, and the video's name is Copper Cabling. Hopefully that can help you get familiar with this. And in the chat room, they're even mentioning, no, A on one side, B on the other side. That's a crossover cable. It is not. It's not crossover cable. That's the internet telling you wrong stuff. That's what they do. Is it possible that auto MDIX can let it work for gigabit? It does not. It doesn't run gigabit, and it doesn't do auto MDIX. You should look at in my video. I even show you how those two don't work. We overlay them one right on top of each other, and they don't work. You will only get 100 megabit. You will never get gigabit from that. So that is exactly how that particular piece works. This standard T568A and T568B are only about colors of wire. It has nothing to do with Ethernet, has nothing to do with crossover cables. It has nothing to do with the IEEE 802.3 standard. That's it. We can have a big fight about it later, I guess. There's really not much more to talk about, though, as far as those pieces are concerned. In fact, it's a great time, now that we've done our performance-based question of the day, to jump to our first new multiple choice question of the day. And this question asks, a user is not able to use their home printer when their corporate VPN is connected. Which of the following would resolve this issue? Would it be split tunnel, clientless VPN, SSH, remote desktop gateway, or out-of-band management? That's the question. So a user is not able to use their home printer when their corporate VPN is connected. Which of the following would resolve this issue? Would it be split tunnel, clientless VPN, SSH, remote desktop gateway, or out-of-band management? If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Instead, you want to follow the link that's on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Yep, there's always folks in the chat room that will tell me how wrong I am about the A and the B, and that, no, it's really a crossover cable, and what am I talking about? See, because this third-party website said it somewhere. But I always recommend, don't trust me. Don't trust the website. Don't trust anybody else. Go ahead and put a T568A on one cable, wire the other end with T568B, plug them into a gigabit switch, and tell me what speed you get. And there, your answer, I never get the answer to that, actually, because they find out very quickly, oh, this doesn't run at gigabit speeds. And then the argument, I guess, if there really is one, is over. That's one of the problems, of course, with the internet is it's fantastic for being able to disseminate information like we're doing here, but it also tends to take these poorly thought out, illogical type configurations, and once they're on one site, they get copied to another site and then copied to another site, and we end up just spreading the wrong information everywhere. So it's up to someone like me, I guess, to just keep saying it over and over. And I think we're making some inroads into having people think differently about cabling and crossovers and what are they really and who sets the standards and where do I go to find those standards. And I think that's always a good thing. Don't ever trust anyone else. Go find the information yourself. I will tell you where the standards are, and you can go look at them, and you can tell me what you think those standards say. So I think that's a good way to do it. I think always you should just do as much research as possible. And I think finding more details about what's in the research can be very, very helpful. If you've ever read through the 802.3 standards, for example, which specify what a crossover cable for Ethernet really looks like, they are difficult to read. They're written by engineers. A lot of the information in there is well above my head, and I'm sure many others. But a lot of the information in the standards is very easy to understand, especially the part where they talk about crossover cables. So I would recommend you go do that. They are absolutely free for you to download and read through if it's for purposes such as research and study. And I would highly recommend you do that on the IEEE website. We should do that sometime. We should step through. Maybe we'll look at that in the after show, because I think everybody should download the standards and have a look at them. Let's see how you did with this question. Again, it asks, a user is not able to use their home printer when their corporate VPN is connected. Which of the following would resolve this issue? Would it be split tunnel, clientless VPN, SSH, remote desktop gateway, or out-of-band management? We can see that 58% of you said the answer is split tunnel, but 19% of you, almost 20%, say clientless VPN would correct this problem. We've got 10% that say out-of-band management is the solution. 7% of you say remote desktop gateway would solve this issue. And 3%, sad little 3%, say the answer is SSH secure shell. Well, for those of you that have kind of worked through these technologies before, you connect to your VPN and you find that once you connect to your VPN at work, that none of your local devices are accessible. So you can be on a local network. You can't talk to the printer. You can't send information across the network to maybe an IoT device. Maybe you'd like to set the temperature controls in your house and your computer can't connect to your temperature controls anymore. That's because your VPN is set up so that everything is going from your device. Maybe you're the remote user down here, and it's talking directly to your corporate VPN concentrator. Every bit of traffic has to go through this tunnel and to the VPN concentrator, which means if you wanted to connect to a printer that was on your local network, you can't do it. The VPN has effectively locked you out from being able to do this. So you'll be able to send information to the concentrator, but if you ever wanted to go anywhere else, you would first have to go to that concentrator and then be routed somewhere else, which of course you can't route back to your internal printer that is on your private and protected network. So instead, what many organizations will do is set up a split tunnel so that they will tell that part of the traffic that needs to go directly to your printer locally or to the internet can simply go directly to those devices instead of coming all the way across to your VPN concentrator and then back again. It's a great way to have the best of both worlds, where you're able to have a secure connection to corporate resources, but you're still able to connect to your local resources or connect to the internet and not have to go through some centralized concentrator somewhere back at your corporate office. So that is split tunnel. We are splitting that VPN tunnel so that some of the traffic goes into the tunnel, some of the traffic is allowed to not go into the tunnel. That's a great way, in fact, very common way that many organizations will set up their VPN so that people don't lose connectivity to their local printer. They can still communicate to their local devices and communicate to corporate devices, and all that traffic is secure and all of that data is safe. It's a great way to do it. Split tunnel is the answer that we were looking for. 58% of you did choose split tunnel. That's absolutely correct and well done. We've got clientless VPN. 20% of you chose that one. We were obviously connected to the VPN in the question. In fact, in the question, we could have been using a clientless VPN to be able to do that. Some clientless VPNs are also full tunnels. Some of them are split tunnels, but you don't know until you configure and set up the VPN, because a client-based or clientless VPN is effectively identical in its functionality. That's not going to help us very much. Certainly not the best solution when we look into this. Some clientless VPNs will only run in a browser, which give us a few extra options for being able to use this. So this could be an answer. I guess if you wanted partial credit, I could give you a little bit of a leeway, but it's not the best answer here. And on the CompTIA exams, you always need to put the best answer. Split tunnel really is the answer that would absolutely resolve the issue that we're dealing with here. 10% of you say out-of-band management. Out-of-band management is used when you're not able to connect to a device over its normal IP address. Instead, you use some other type of connectivity to be able to access and manage those devices. This is very commonly done on remote sites, for example, where you might have an internet connection coming in with a cable modem or with a DSL line, and then you might have a separate, maybe wireless connection, a satellite connection, in some cases even a dial-up modem that would allow someone access into those systems. They're effectively able to dial around any type of network outage and access the local devices and be able to manage those. Sometimes that can be a good way to have access even though your primary network connection is down. We also have remote desktop gateway. This is a method of doing or completing a remote desktop session through a central gateway, a central consolidated server, where we first connect to the server, and then from the server we can jump to a lot of other devices on the inside of a network. It's very commonly done on networks that are highly secure. Instead of opening up separate pinholes in the firewall to every remote desktop device, they open a single connection to a remote desktop gateway. You connect to the gateway, and from there you can bounce around to other devices on the network. Then we've got, lastly, SSH, Secure Shell, which is a great way for managing things at the console, but has nothing to do with not being able to use a home printer. SSH isn't going to help you at all for that issue, and only 3% of you thought that was the right answer. The one that you would use is the split tunnel. Configure your VPN with a split tunnel, and now suddenly everyone will have access to their local devices, such as their printers. You guys did a good job on that one. Let's do another question. I'm talking a lot on this one, aren't I? So let's get a couple more in here. This question asks, which of the following would be the best way to manage multicast flooding? If you're on a network these days, you probably have some utilities that are using multicast. Would the best way to manage multicast flooding be full duplex, asymmetric routing, static routing, IGMP snooping, or default gateway? Got a few options there. All things from the exam objectives. They all look very familiar to me. The question again asks, which of the following would be the best way to manage multicast flooding? Would it be full duplex, asymmetric routing, static routing, IGMP snooping, or default gateway? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. These are questions and technologies you need to know about. So if you're looking through this list and you're looking at one or two of these and wondering, what is that again? What are those? What exactly does that do? If any of this looks unusual, make a note of it, because all 5 of these answers come directly from the exam objectives. And this would be a good opportunity for you to maybe figure out that maybe you could spend a little more time studying on one topic or another. I try to put actual real things in as answers so that we can not just find out what the right answer is, but if we get it wrong, we can find out why we got the answer wrong, which I think is a great way to learn, especially as we're going through these study groups, because that's what we want to do, is use this and study a little bit better and be able to learn everything we need to know to pass this exam. This is an answer, multicast flooding. In fact, you may not even realize many of your homes and certainly most of your businesses have some level of multicast that is being used. A lot of multicast may create problems. There are ways to manage that, how would we manage it? I think I've given too much information already. I'm really just repeating the question in other ways, which you've probably already done in your mind, trying to figure out what the answer is. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, which of the following would be the best way to manage multicast flooding? Would it be full duplex, asymmetric routing, static routing, IGMP snooping, or default gateway? What did you choose? Let's see how many of you know multicast. Oh, we're not quite sure. We got about 3 here that came in number 1. 37% say IGMP snooping would be the right answer. Not a majority, but certainly the plurality of you chose that one. 27% of you chose asymmetric routing would fix this issue. 20% of you said full duplex would be a good way to manage multicast flooding. 10% of you said static routing. And then lastly, 4% say default gateway. So what would be a good way? Multicast flooding, there are a lot of different ways that we use multicast on a network. On my local network at home, my home video surveillance system uses multicast. And if you have a lot of multicast traffic on a network, it can certainly create a huge flood of traffic. And that flooding of traffic can affect the throughput of other devices that are not necessarily part of that multicast communication. So it would be good if we had some way to manage that. Well, our switches are the ones that are managing the forwarding process, of course. They're taking traffic from one interface and sending it to another interface. And the multicast traffic is effectively sent to every switch port. That's because multicast sometimes needs to be viewed by everybody on the network. But if you don't need to do that, you've got a great opportunity now that you could go through the process of controlling this. So if I don't need to see that multicast traffic, don't send it to my switch interface. We can control that through a feature on the switch that is referred to as IGMP snooping. This is the Internet Group Management Protocol. This is how these devices are able to subscribe and unsubscribe to these multicast streams. And if you're trying to manage the process of where multicast is going, or perhaps more importantly, where you don't want multicast to go, if your switch supports it, you can turn on the feature for IGMP snooping and be able to see what interfaces really need this multicast traffic and what interfaces don't need any of this multicast traffic. This is a switch that I have that has IGMP snooping. I can enable it. In fact, on this switch, it's not enabled. I would enable it with the checkbox that's there at the top. And then it tells me and gives me options for the type of multicast flexibility I would like to have between the different VLANs on my switch. So you've got a lot of different options here to be able to work through these. And I think if you're someone who is challenged with dealing with a lot of multicast, or you notice after putting in your own video surveillance system that everything else is slowing down, perhaps your switch supports this capability, you may be able to fix this problem with one single checkbox or one single configuration setting, and everything suddenly goes back to high performance. IGMP snooping is what we were looking for. And in fact, most of you did choose that one. 37% of you chose IGMP snooping as the right answer. Asymmetric routing is when traffic might go outward through one router, and when it's coming back in, it's coming in through a different router. It's not uncommon on very large networks, especially if you'd like to have redundancy. Sometimes it's done intentionally that way, but it can be a challenge to manage that and to be able to engineer it, especially if you have a firewall in the middle. Firewall needs to see both sides of the conversation to be able to work properly. So sometimes asymmetric routing can create a few additional challenges in design of the network. But asymmetric routing doesn't manage or change the way multicast will work. It simply changes how the traffic is going out and what direction it's using to come back. So that's not going to be an answer that's going to work for us. So in this case, asymmetric routing would not be the right answer. We have full duplex, which is certainly a very common and most of the time the default communication for our Ethernet connection. Since we are communicating directly to Ethernet switches and back, we can have effectively 2 full bandwidth channels between both of those, so we can send and receive traffic simultaneously, which is certainly a great way to manage traffic. But multicast is going one section when we're going through all of these, that one direction down to you. So even if it was full duplex, it wouldn't be the issue. You'd be in this situation where full duplex is simply allowing traffic to go out as it's coming in, but it doesn't help you manage the flooding process at all. So not going to be the right answer. Full duplex doesn't really manage or help us there. Static routing is used when you want to tell your router specifically where to send traffic based on the destination IP address. Well, that's not going to help with multicast flooding. I guess we could either turn it on or turn it off, but that doesn't help us get multicast working more efficiently. And so static routing is not going to be the right answer either. And default gateway, changing the default gateway is effectively a way that you set your own static route on your local machine. So default gateway is not going to be the right answer either. That simply tells us what device or what router are we going to use to be able to communicate outside of our local subnet. So in this case, the only answer here that has anything with managing multicast traffic and being able to make multicast traffic work a lot better with all of the other traffic on your network is the answer that 37% of you chose for IGMP snooping. That is the right answer. Well, as you've already seen, there is so much information on the Network Plus exam, and we're just getting into it. We've already talked about protocols, we've talked about cabling, we've discussed ideas with other types of configurations and designs and multicast, and in fact, my Network Plus course is 93 videos long. There's over 14 hours of content, and it would be great if you were able to watch every single bit of that. But I realize that for many of you, time is of the essence. Maybe you watch at a higher speed, or maybe you've watched all the videos and you think it would be nice if everything was in one consolidated place. So I created a book that does exactly that. It is my N10-008 course notes. These course notes take all of the text, all of the graphics, all of the tables, everything that you saw in the videos is in this book. So if you wanted to have your own set of perfectly crafted notes that is complete, the context is in the same order as the CompTIA exam objectives, and it matches the videos that you're already watching, then you want to get a copy of these course notes. This is also a great way to support what we do here on our website. Many of you in the pre-show were asking about how they might be able to help financially with keeping this crazy experiment going. Well, you don't have to worry, because this is a great way that not only helps support what we do here, it gives you valuable information that you can use to help you with your Network Plus studies. If you want to learn more about the course notes, you can find them on my website. Go to professormesser.com/NPCN for Network Plus course notes. And of course, this is one where we not only have the digital version, but we have the physical version of the course notes. If you're somebody who likes a printed book, then we've got printed book versions for you as well. The course notes are available in both a digital edition and a physical edition. You'll see tabs for that on the website when you're ready to purchase. And when you purchase the physical edition notes, I'm obviously going to ship these to you. You will get a free copy of the digital edition to use while you're waiting on these to arrive. These are obviously high quality, well printed, perfect bound notes in color. I wouldn't do it any other way. Find out more on the website. Go to professormesser.com/NPCN. Let's get some more questions in. Our next question, a cabling question. We've got one, and this question asks, a network administrator needs to run a 10 gigabit Ethernet connection to a room 75 meters away. Which of the following would be the minimum category of unshielded cable required for this task? Would it be category 5E, category 6, category 6A, category 7, or category 8? You need to know your cable categories for Network Plus, certainly, and you certainly need to know them for this exam. The question again asks, a network administrator needs to run a 10 gigabit Ethernet connection to a room 75 meters away. Which of the following would be the minimum category of unshielded cable required for this task? Is it category 5E, category 6, category 6A, category 7, or category 8? You can lock in your answer. Go to professormesser.com/QA. A lot of people lock in their answers in. I always watch the numbers go up. And I wonder, do we all know the answer on this one? Is this a gimme? Or is it that we all think we know the answer and we're just not sure? Well, we don't know until we look. I don't peek at the answers. There's another screen I can go to see what people are doing. And I like to wait. It's much more fun to break down what the answers are after the fact than to see them as they're moving up in the list and being able to do it. See if you know the answers on this one. A network administrator needs to run a 10 gigabit Ethernet connection to a room 75 meters away. Which of the following would be the minimum category of unshielded cable required for this task? Is it Category 5E, Category 6, Category 6A, Category 7, or Category 8? Let's see what you chose on this list. We'll close our poll, and we can see that 36% say Category 6A, 30% say Category 6, and then we've got a tie for, that's effectively a tie for first. We have effectively a tie for second between Category 5E and Category 7, and then hardly anybody chose Category 8 and being able to break these down. So the real key, I think, is to be able to know what these different categories are and where they fit in this picture. So here are different Ethernet standards, a list of the standards that we need to know for the N10-008 exam. So in this, I start with 1000 base T. We also have 10G base T, and I have 40G base T. So this is effectively 1 gig, 10 gig, and 40 gig communication, and the different categories of cable that are supported for those different standards. And this is something, we were discussing this in our Discord, I think it was yesterday, where people will tend to say, what is the speed of Category 5? And I like to mention that the Category 5 doesn't have a speed. The Category 5 is a cable. It's a piece of copper. It sits on your desk. It's not moving. It's not going anywhere. It's like asking, what is the speed of barbed wire? It doesn't have a speed. It just sits there. I mean, you could run something over the barbed wire. And in fact, there are people that have run Ethernet over barbed wire, but the barbed wire doesn't have a speed. The signal that you're putting onto the wire is what determines what the speed is. The category is a specification for the construction of cabling that supports the standard of electricity that we're putting over this connection. That's really what we are referring to whenever we're working through them. So if you were to look at the configurations of the standards for Ethernet, you would see there are a number of different standards for gigabit. But in this question, we were asking about 10 gig. For 10 gig would be this way, that we have 10G base T, 10G base T, 10G base T. We got Category 6, 6A, and 7. And you can see unshielded 55 meters. So in this question, it seems that this question I asked unshielded, really I should have asked shielded to be able to have a proper question here. But I can't really change it now. Can I? Can I change it to shielded for this? Because that really is what we were looking for, was the shielded, which would mean the answer would be Category 6. Now there is Category 6A. Category 6A, the augmented version of this, is the one that we run into problems with. So this is one where 100 meters works, but there's shielding that you would deal with there. So really kind of a bad question. The wording that I use there is a little bit squirrely there. I kind of put a twist into it that created more confusion than it really should have. So Category 6A is where I was shooting to get the right answer here. What we really should do is change the question to 55 meters and ask the question again. That's really what I was probably intending when I wrote it. 55 meters means we would use Category 6. Anything else above that for shielded would be 100 meters. Category 6A comes in a shielded form. So that's one. If you're dealing with cable, it's natural that there would be confusion, especially since you have all of these different standards. Look at all of these, the 1000 base T, the 10G base T, and the 40G base T, all have different requirements for cabling. And that's something that we always need to know, is you've got this 1000 base T, the minimum category required for 1000 base T is Category 5. So those are things that are in the IEEE specifications. I mentioned earlier, it's useful to be able to look through the IEEE specs to know what the differences are and what the requirements are. I would always recommend that as well. So I think 1000 base T, let's change this question to be 55 meters so it actually makes sense. And if it is 55 meters, you would have Category 6 as the minimum required of unshielded cable that would be able to support 10G base T. That's the one that I think I would use for this one. So that is the one that you should focus on. These cables and the distances and the standards are important things to know for the exam. You could get a question like this that is able to break those down and understand what is really different between all of these different cables and how they match to the different standards. Some folks in the chat room are effectively egging me on and asking me, "Oh, what is the difference between Category 5 and Category 5E?" You're just looking for trouble. You're looking to stir up and create drama, aren't you? The answer, interestingly enough, is nothing. They're identical when you're working through that. And if you are working in an unshielded configuration and you have a Category 6A that is unshielded, obviously can go 100 meters. Category 6A is one that does have at least a little bit of that going on. See, you're not gonna catch me with that one. We need to go into another question because we have time left. I'm going to quickly get through another question so that we can go into this one. Before we do that, by the way, I would like to remind you that if you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email that certifies that you are watching this live stream. The way that you would do that is to go to the Professor Messer website. At the top and the bottom, there's a link for Contact Us. In that Contact Us link, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, put April 2024 Network Plus. And in the body of the message, on a line by itself, put the super secret code word of the month. And the super secret code word is Administrator IPS. It's actually 2 words. Administrator IPS are the super secret code words of the month. Put those anywhere in the body of that message on a line by itself, and I will send you back a message. Again, go to the Professor Messer website, go to the top or the bottom, click on Contact Us, and in that Contact Us link, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, put Network Plus, April 2024 Network Plus, to be specific. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code word of the month, Administrator IPS. Code words of the month, Administrator IPS. Let's do this question, though, which asks, an administrator is reviewing the logs from an IPS. Which of the following would be most likely found in this log? Would it be Active Directory authentication success, SQL injection attempt, nightly file transfer results, web server restarts, or spanning tree status updates? It's a lot to look at there. The question again asks, an administrator is reviewing the logs from an IPS. Which of the following would be most likely found in this log? Would it be Active Directory authentication success, SQL injection attempt, nightly file transfer results, web server restarts, or spanning tree status updates? See if you know the answer. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. If you think you know the answer, please know answers in the chat room. Please know hints in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Have you looked through the logs of an IPS? You should. There's a lot of good information in there. You should certainly know why you've got the IPS installed, right? That might help you answer this particular question. Obviously, an IPS, you need to know what that is. You need to know what it looks like. You need to be familiar with what the differences are in all of these. And in fact, all of the things that are listed here, you should be familiar with where you would find that information and in what log it would be, because all of this information can be found somewhere. Where could it be found? Maybe we'll think about what that would be when we go through the answer, see if we can guess where we might find this information or where it might show up in a log. A lot of people locked in their answers already, so let's see how you did. The question again asks, an administrator is reviewing the logs from an IPS. Which of the following would be most likely found in this log? Would it be Active Directory authentication success, SQL injection attempt, nightly file transfer results, web server restarts, or spanning tree status updates? Let's see how you did with this one. Out of 144 of you, 65% of you say SQL injection attempts would be found in that log. But 19%, almost 20%, say Active Directory authentication success would be listed in the IPS. We also have 9% of you that say spanning tree status updates is what you would find. And then only 3% say nightly file transfer results, and only 2% say web server restarts. By far, most of you said the answer, 65% of you said the answer was a SQL injection attempt. Well, first let's talk about what an IPS is. IPS, they used to be standalone devices that all they did was act as an intrusion detection system or intrusion prevention system. So those are some very powerful tools to be able to watch traffic that's going over your network and look for places where there could be attacks or attempts to take advantage of a known vulnerability, sometimes even an unknown vulnerability. So anytime we're trying to find an intrusion, that is what the IPS or IDS will do. These days, we don't really have separate IDS devices and separate IPS devices. We really have the functionality of IDS and IPS have been encapsulated into one single, these days, next generation firewall. So your modern firewalls tend to have this functionality built into them. We're not really purchasing individual types of devices to be able to do that. So hopefully that's one that you can think about whenever you're starting to go through and understand what the differences are for this. These are effectively the same thing, except an IDS simply sees the attack and can't stop it, and the IPS not only sees the attack, but it does stop it. So that is one, whenever we're starting to walk through the problems, an IPS is a much better thing to have because it can block those attempts right there. In this case, at the firewall, or if you have an older IPS, I guess it will attack it and stop it at the IPS itself. What these devices are looking for are known vulnerabilities, known attacks that are going after known vulnerabilities. So if we look at all of the different options that we had, we'll start at the bottom of the list. We have 2% that said web server restarts. Well, restarting a web server is a relatively normal administrative function. It doesn't necessarily even mean that something bad is going on, and it's something that happens on the web server itself, usually administratively. And if an IPS isn't going to even know that a web server restarted because there is no traffic going across the network that is causing or requiring that web server to restart, it's not an attack. It's simply an administrative function. Therefore, you would not find this in an IPS. Nightly file transfer results, that is not even in the purview of what an IPS might do. That is simply, how did your file transfer go overnight? Did it work or did it not work? An IPS is unconcerned because that's normal traffic. In fact, that should never appear in your IPS. This is not someone trying to attack or take advantage of a known vulnerability. There's no exploit here. So therefore, this would not show up in your IPS. We've got 9% of you that said spanning tree status updates. Spanning tree talks a lot on your network behind the scenes. You never see it, of course. The switches are all talking to each other. But these status updates are occurring about every 2 seconds in spanning tree. So there are a lot of spanning tree updates going across your network. None of these are malicious. None of these are someone trying to take advantage of a known vulnerability or to exploit a shortcoming inside of a system. Spanning tree status updates will not appear in an IPS log. We have Active Directory authentication success. Well, somebody authenticating properly onto your network is not a problem. That's not an attack. It's not an exploit. It's nothing that would be bad. In fact, it's good. Somebody used the proper username, password, and perhaps additional multi-factor authentication to be able to properly authenticate to your Active Directory database. Therefore, that would not appear in your IPS either. The only answer here is the one for the SQL injection attempt. That is certainly a known type of vulnerability. It is certainly an exploit that can occur across your SQL database. In fact, if somebody sees a SQL database out there, the attackers will instantly try a SQL injection. 65% of you said that's what you would find. In fact, that is exactly the type of attack you would expect to see in an IPS log. That is the right answer. And if you were someone who's working on the IPS or you're looking through the logs of an IPS, you've probably seen this before. That is the right answer. And 65% of you got that one absolutely correct. I know we're at the top of the hour, but let's get one more question in, shall we? Let's do one more. Why not? To be able to do this, the next question on our list is this one. And it asks, an administrator is configuring a system for FHRP. Which of the following would best describe this configuration? Would it be redundant routers, large frame size, L2 loop prevention, wireless authentication, or DDoS prevention? An administrator is configuring a system for FHRP. Which of the following would best describe this configuration? Redundant routers, large frame size, L2 loop prevention, wireless authentication, or DDoS prevention? If you think you know the answer to this one, you've got the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. It's got to be one of these, right? All of these technologies are in the N10-008 exam objectives. So again, if you're looking at one of these and you're wondering, wait, what is that? I don't remember what that is exactly. Make a note. Write that one down. Put it in your log. Put it in your note file. Put it in whatever you're using, your mind map, whatever you're using to help study. Put it there so that you can go back and look at that technology later so you become more familiar with it. But this is one where we want to know, maybe studying your acronyms helped. If you happen to know what this is, we've configured a system for FHRP. You may have noticed that's not a word. That is indeed an acronym of something. It's an abbreviation or an acronym. I look forward to your cards and letters on that one too. I get a lot of people trying to explain to me the difference between an acronym and an abbreviation. But to me, they're all acronyms, and I'm going to always call them acronyms. If for no other reason, it keeps the cards and letters coming. And sometimes I just like to read through them. It's late at night, kind of lonely. Oh, here's a nice letter from someone who's asking me to use those terms properly, and I refuse to. So that's just me being a little bit of a troll on my side, I guess. Sorry about that. It's just really much easier for me just to call it an acronym and not have to think through what the differences might be. Nobody needs to pressure me in that level. I'm good. Just a single direction on a rail never changes from that perspective until it does. And then, of course, we all have to talk about that. Let's see how this one works. Don't worry. I still like to get the cards and letters. I'm not complaining. Keep sending the cards and letters. It's always good. Let's see how you did with this one. An administrator is configuring a system for FHRP. Which of the following would best describe this configuration? Is it redundant routers, large frame size, L2 loop prevention, wireless authentication, or DDoS prevention? What did you choose? Let's find out. The answer, wow, 78% say it's redundant routers. Is this one of those where we all got it wrong? And in fact, it's one of these with a single digit, because we have effectively a four-way tie for second place, with 6% say L2 loop prevention, 6% say DDoS prevention, 5% say large frame size, and 4% say wireless authentication. This is one, whenever you start getting into these, and you want to know, how does this standard really have anything to do with what we're working on? We first have to know what the acronym is. And in this case, the FHRP is a first hop redundancy protocol, which is kind of a broad term because it's really describing a series of different ways that you could use to make your network more redundant. This is a big problem. If you look at the configuration of IP, you may have even noticed this when you were configuring an IP address on your workstation, is that you've typed in your IP address, you put in the subnet mask. This is if you're doing it manually. Many of us don't. It's just DHCP. But if you type in things manually, if you've been working on a network, you've had to configure some devices with a manual IP address. You put in the IP address, you put in the subnet mask, you put in the default gateway. And you may have thought, wait, that is my one connection to the outside world, is that default gateway. If that default gateway is not there, I cannot go outside of this local subnet. But I only have, if you look at the configuration, there's only one default gateway for a device. You can't put in another gateway. There's nowhere to put it because the standard for IP was never written for multiple gateways to be used. There's always one way out, and you have to go across that link. Well, that creates a problem. Of course, on an enterprise network, you always want to maintain uptime and availability. What happens if that gateway goes down? What happens if that router fails? It loses power, the power supply blows, and suddenly that device is no longer there. Well, normally you would not be able to get out of your local subnet. So what we've done is create a series of different methods, technologies, and protocols to be able to provide redundancy. And broadly, we refer to these protocols as a first hop redundancy protocol. One of the more popular versions of a first hop redundancy protocol is the Virtual Router Redundancy Protocol, VRRP. And it's one where we are not using the actual IP address of that device. We're using an IP address that we put on the inside of it. It's a kind of a fake IP address. It's a virtual IP. It doesn't live in a physical world. It lives on the inside virtual world of that router. What that allows us to do is that if this router was to lose power, the power supply fails, it's no longer available, that virtual IP is picked up by a different router, and now suddenly everybody's able to use that other router because obviously your default gateway's IP address didn't change. It just moved. But it moved behind the scenes. Nobody saw it move. It suddenly was able to go somewhere else. So the virtual router redundancy protocol is one that is invisible to the end users. They don't even know it's happening, but it's one that provides you with a way to have redundancy on these networks, especially these important networks that really cannot go down. You'll probably be using a first hop redundancy protocol, or FHRP. For that to be able to work, of course, we need more than one router. We need more than one default gateway, and redundant routers is indeed the best description of what this FHRP would be using. And 78% of you already knew this. Redundant routers is what we would be using. FHRP, the first hop redundancy protocol, has nothing to do with the type of traffic we are sending. It has to do with where your default gateway might be. Therefore, things like loop prevention, frame size, wireless authentication, and DDoS prevention have nothing to do with this redundancy protocol. Those are all methods of communication once the network is up and running and you're sending traffic. So if we're ever in a case where we need to create something relating to FHRP, we're going to need more than one router. And that redundant routers is absolutely the answer we were looking for this question. Didn't fool anybody. 78% of you got that one absolutely right. See, a much better written question than the one for categories of cable that we had earlier. If I just would get on the stick a little bit, we wouldn't have those problems. But it's live, people. This is how it works. We're always going to run into challenges like that on a live stream. We appreciate your flexibility. Thank you for your patience. We'll get through it. And speaking of getting through it, you should always have a copy of the exam objectives. I've mentioned these a number of times in this live stream already. If you don't have a copy of these objectives, you are doing yourself a significant disservice. They are free to download from the CompTIA website. Go to your favorite search engine, type in CompTIA exam objectives. And if you do that, probably the first link you'll get is to the exam objectives on the CompTIA website. If you would like to get to it even faster, you can go to professormesser.com/objectives and just click over from there. There's a link on that page that will take you to the CompTIA exam objectives. Again, they're free and they have everything you need to know to pass this exam. Get your hands on these. They're a great checklist when you're ready to take the exam to see if you really are ready. They're a good barometer on how much you have memorized from this set of objectives. And CompTIA stays very, very, very close to these objectives. Whenever I start looking at other study materials out on the internet, they tend to go well outside the scope of these objectives, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it has nothing to do with the exam that you're about to sit down and take. CompTIA stays laser focused to these objectives. If you know everything in these objectives, you're going to pass your exam. And if you're going through a topic and you're wondering, does this have anything to do with my exam? You can always cross-reference back to these objectives. If it's on the objectives, you need to know it. If it's not on the objectives, for the purposes of your exam, you don't need to know it. So that can help you with your studies and knowing what is a good thing to study and what is a bad thing to study. And am I really ready to take this exam? This document will tell you very, very definitively. We do one of these study groups every month. We have a Network Plus study group scheduled for next month on May the 15th. You can see that we also have A Plus study groups scheduled for May the 7th and May the 9th. We got a Security Plus study group scheduled for May the 22nd. Although we also have a Security Plus study group coming up next week. If you want to stop back by a week from today, we've got one scheduled this month in April. We'd love for you to stop back next week and follow along. I haven't even written those questions yet either. I promise no category of cable questions on that one. Honest. I will not be putting that on my security. Well, it's not in the Security Plus study objective, so that would be why that we had one there. May 15th is when you can come back for more Network Plus, though. And of course, we have all of our Network Plus study groups all archived on our website. It's on a YouTube playlist. So if you wanted to go back to even look at some of our older study groups, anything that's listed as N10-008 applies to this current version of the Network Plus exam. Another good place to go if you want more questions, more performance-based questions, more multiple choice-based questions. They are all there in the replay. Well, we're not done yet. Although the first hour is done, where I ask you the questions, we go into the second hour where you can ask me questions. It's our after show. Stick around for that, coming up immediately after this. You don't even have to touch anything. We just transition right into it. Don't forget about our success bundle on our website. Go to professormesser.com/netsuccess. And of course, we have our vouchers on our website. Don't pay full price for your voucher on the CompTIA website. You instead want to go to professormesser.com/vouchers and get your voucher if you happen to be in the US or Canada. We also have plenty of places to go. When we're done here, we'll be on Discord. Don't forget about our YouTube channel. And if you like this video, it would be tremendous if you could give us a thumbs up. It would be even better. You would make my day if you went to our YouTube channel and subscribed. It's a metric that is important more for YouTube than for us, but it's also nice to know that it's something that you might like to watch and you might like to see more of what we're doing. Simply go to professormesser.com/YouTube and click that subscribe button. It really would be very, very nice of you to do so. Thank you so much. Well, stick around. We got a lot more happening. We've got our after show, and I'll be able to answer any questions you might have. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Okay. There we go. Got a sip. Let's bring up a different screen here. Hello, chat room. Well, even my best laid plans of trying to get things done on my website and making sure that you have everything you need to answer these questions, sometimes I don't get them completely right. But that's okay, because now we will go to the part of the live stream where I am going to ask you questions. This is our after show. And in the after show, I like to answer questions that you might have really about technology, about certifications, about IT, or about anything else. For example, the website is asking on the chat room, do I play cricket? I do not. I do not play cricket. I would like to play cricket. I just am not able to play cricket. I don't know. It's one of those where I guess I could. There are people in town that do play cricket. I think where I happen to live, there is a team. It's not a professional. In the US, we don't have professional cricket. It's more like a semi-professional type cricket. There's a lot of those. You'll find it on the YouTube. Look for those. The U.S. Cricket Association is the name, or something like that. Very similar to that. The United States Cricket Folks Society, or something. Someone in the chat room will be able to tell all of us where it is and have those pieces of it. But that is a great place that you can find out more and maybe work through some of the things that people are doing with cricket in the United States. Here in Florida, there were plans. In fact, they've created a number of cricket playing and watching arenas and areas. We've got pitches that have been set up in South Florida, and they're looking to put more throughout other parts of the state. And it's kind of nice having this mix of people in Florida, because they're bringing cultures from other countries that are very popular outside of the United States and finally bringing them into the U.S. So we're seeing a lot of back and forth with that. It's nice to see some growth in some other areas rather than the traditional U.S. football, basketball, baseball. So it's always nice to have something else there and being able to work through it. If you would like to ask a question, simply go to the website. Here's your link. Go to professormesser.com/QA. There is a link on the top that can tell you a lot about submitting a question. I see the questions pop up on my side. I can choose the questions that you are submitting, and we can step through each one of those. That's where you would go to be able to do that. And this is where we could certainly step through another piece of these and get an understanding of what questions might be important to you. For example, here's a question from Ahan, who asks, do you know how much the PBQs are weighted? Let's say I get 88% on the multiple choice questions, but I don't answer any of the performance-based questions. Well, how much are they worth? How are they weighted? How many points do you get for a performance-based question? How many points do you get for a multiple choice-based question? And how does CompTIA score them? Well, I can answer this for you very definitively. Nobody knows. CompTIA doesn't tell us. They're not going to tell us. They have very specifically made it very difficult to reverse engineer this. If not, well, it's impossible to reverse engineer this because they share nothing of their grading scheme. Some people will postulate that the multiple choice questions must be worth much less than the performance-based questions. Other people will say the multiple choice questions are worth more than the performance-based questions. And neither one of them can ever be proved wrong because we have no idea and there's no way to know. So even though it's an interesting question, it's one where we could kind of think about as we're doing our studies and we're wondering about whether these are really how these questions are weighted. The reality is we will never know. And CompTIA will not tell us. They will always keep this as something that is unknown. And there's really not a good way to be able to reverse engineer this one. I guess if we had a lot of money, we could go to an exam and we could answer one question and we knew we were answering that question right. And then we could end the exam and we could see how many points that was. Then we can go do it again with a performance-based question. Then we can go do it again with another multiple choice-based question. We could start compiling this data. So there is a way to do it, but it would take a very long time. You can take your first exam, and if you fail that one, you can take the next exam immediately. But if you fail that one, you have to wait 2 weeks, I think it is. Or is it 7 days or 14 days? They've changed it up recently, but there's a time delay. So you have to wait at least a week or 2 weeks. We can look at this. Let's go to the CompTIA website and look for the CompTIA retake policy. That's what we are referring to there. CompTIA retake policy is what you want. The retake policy says if you fail your first attempt, there's no waiting period between the first and second. However, before your third attempt or subsequent attempt, you shall be required to wait for a period of at least 14 calendar days, so 2 weeks. So that slows my whole plan of statistical analysis of the website, assuming that I had all the money to take these exams over and over again. It would take so long that it would not be possible to do so. So all we really have is stories. And people have given me information about how they've taken these exams and what happened. So one of the best things I can kind of tell you about this one is that there have been people that have come to my website, and I have no reason to doubt what they were saying. I believe they were legitimate. They were saying something that really happened to them. Is they took their exam, they skipped over the performance-based questions at the beginning, which you can do. You can read through them, but you can skip through them as you're going through the exam. And they went to all of the multiple choice-based questions. And then they answered as many of the multiple choice-based questions as they could. Then they decided, okay, we're done with the multiple choice. Let's circle back to the beginning and work on the performance-based questions. And the moment they circled back to the first question, they ran out of time. 90 minutes had gone by. They didn't realize it. They weren't watching the clock. Before they could answer any of their performance-based questions, the exam was over. And they passed. So after all of their worries about performance-based questions and are they worth so many points and what happens if you don't get them right, and I'm so concerned about the performance-based questions, in at least this example for this person with this set of questions and this particular grading for that particular exam, they were able to get through the exam and pass it without answering any of the performance-based questions. So that should at least make a lot of people think differently about how they believe the exam is scored. It certainly gives you a few extra data points to consider. Now, not every exam is scored the same way. Not every exam has the same type of questions. I'm sure the questions are worth different points for each question. So you don't know. So that's one of those where you just have to get through the exam. Don't worry about how it's scored. Don't worry about how many questions of each type you're getting. The final score will work itself out in the end, and you will have no input into that process, and you'll never be able to reverse engineer it anyway. So my recommendation to you is there are many things for you to worry about on the exam. This is not one of them. Let the scoring happen as it's going to happen. It will happen naturally and organically without your input or knowledge. So focus instead on the exam objectives. I think that is probably the best thing you can do you're working through the details of this, and focus really on the important things, which in this case would be the exam objectives. Great question. Thank you for sending that one through. Let's do some more questions on this list for more details. So there are lots of ways to go through and understand the topics that are on this exam. One that probably gets more questions than some of the others is the ones mentioned by Dwight here, who says, thanks for the excellent study materials. Is there a way to memorize all of the different port numbers and acronyms? Well, of course there's a way, and that's through rote memorization. And it's one of those where I think even CompTIA understands that that's probably not the best thing to spend your time doing, is a lot of rote memorization. Now that the N10-009 exam objectives are out, the port numbers are still in there. So if you were wondering if I was going down the road that they've suddenly come to the idea that port numbers are not important, nope, that's not the case. Port numbers are important. You will be using port numbers every day in your job, regardless of what you're doing, whether it is a job working with a desktop, you're working with databases, you're working with application developers, whatever it is, you will be working with port numbers. And if you were to go to my course notes, I've got a big list of all the port numbers in there, although it's relatively unnecessary for me to put this in here because they're in your exam objectives as well. I think I got the exam objectives here. There they are. So on the objectives, we'll go straight to the port numbers. They're in section 1.5. There they are. So the section 1.5 says, explain common ports and protocols, their application, and encrypted alternatives. And you've got a big list of port numbers and encrypted versions of those port numbers listed there. They're all listed out. So File Transfer Protocol, or FTP, is ports 20 and 21. Secure Shell, port 22. Secure File Transfer Protocol, SFTP, which is, by the way, a file transfer protocol that uses SSH, also port 22. Not too surprising. Telnet is port 23. So you can start to see the list is here. It's a relatively large list. Was there 20 here, 21, something like that? There's a lot of port numbers listed there. You will tend to get these port numbers memorized naturally as you work in a position with technology. You'll just, after a while, they will become second nature to you. So the problem you run into now, though, is many of you that are working on this Network Plus certification exam may have never had a job working in technology. You've never had to work with port numbers. It's never been an issue. So therefore, you've never had a chance to learn it organically. Instead, we sort of have to go through this list to be able to do it. But I'll give you a hint. Even though this is a bit of a flashcard type thing, Secure Shell, SSH, Secure Shell, port 22. I would recommend you add one additional piece to this, and it's even listed here. It says explain common ports and protocols, okay, SSH 22. Their application. They're not referring to what app you would run this with. Oh, I use PuTTY. That's what I use for secure. That's not what they're talking about. They're talking about how do you implement this into your network? In what cases would you use this technology? That's what they're referring to. So if you are creating a flashcard for this, which effectively I did in my course notes, I explain the port number, the protocol, and then what it does, because that's really how this is going to be presented to you on the exam. CompTIA will ask you a question that says something along the lines of a network technician is connecting to a remote Linux device and configuring a file at a terminal prompt. What port number is in use? What's the protocol? You didn't tell me the protocol. Well, they did, but they did it in a roundabout way. They told you that it was a remote terminal connection to Linux. What protocol is that? So you need to know the application of how this protocol operates so that you can then answer questions like that one, where the answer is obviously, oh, that's SSH that they were using. Since they're using SSH, they're obviously running port 22. So don't just flashcard it. SSH is 22. SSH is Secure Shell. Add that extra bit of information to it so that you will be ready when the question is asking you about how this protocol is used and not what this protocol is. CompTIA doesn't ask a lot of trivia questions on their exam. And knowing a port number and only a port number is certainly a trivia question. Let's do some more questions that are coming in. Again, if you'd like to ask a question, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. There's a tab at the top of the screen where you can submit a question. They pop up on my side, and then I can choose to put it up so that we can all see what you would like to know. Let's keep going on this list and have a familiarity with what the different options are. There are a number of challenges when you start getting into the industry. You know, one of the hardest ones is just getting that first job in technology. You're coming out of school, you've got a degree, you've worked through some certifications, maybe you're changing careers. You just need to get your foot in the door. And this question from Alex asks, do you think you need to be passionate about IT to succeed in the industry? And how do you break through to entry level? You know, this is one I think if you look at YouTube, you go to the YouTube and you watch a lot of videos on people and how they look at career, passion comes up a lot. And it's tempered. I think the term is so broad that we really have to focus in on what we mean by passionate. There are a lot of things we're passionate about. I am passionate about Xbox. Well, that doesn't mean I'm going to get a job doing anything associated with Xbox. In fact, where I happen to live in my neck of the woods, there are probably no jobs available that pay anything, that have anything to do with Xbox. So although it's a passion, it doesn't really translate back into a career. So I temper the term passion with that. However, I think that in IT, the more interested you are in the technology, the farther you're going to go. Certainly the faster you're going to go, if not farther. The one thing that I find, though, is that it's not even necessarily a passion for understanding what's happening. I think a lot of us in IT just love to solve problems. And I think ultimately, if you were to step back from almost any IT position, certainly an entry-level position, it's all about solving problems. It's all about having a puzzle that needs to be figured out. And in this particular case, the puzzle is one that deals with operating systems and hardware. It deals with networks and protocols. It deals with security devices and encryption. But you have to understand the operating systems and the hardware and the protocols and the networks and the switches and the firewalls and the VPNs. You have to understand how they work to be able to then solve the problem. You're effectively a high-tech repair person. You're a high-tech mechanic. You can't fix the engine unless you know how the engine works. Same thing applies to protocols, to applications, to networks, to operating systems, and so on. So I tell people all the time, if you have an interest in solving problems, if that's something that's exciting, especially when you fix it. There's nothing more of a hit of that quick bit of adrenaline when you think you know the answer to this. You work on a problem. It's really challenging. You change that configuration setting. You hit a button. Oh, it worked. We just fixed it. It's working now. We did it. That really fix it? Let me put it back the way it was. Yep, it's broken. All right, let me put the fix back in. Yep, we fixed it. There's a perfect example of why we really enjoy this type of job. Not everybody loves that type of troubleshooting, fix it, solving of the problem. Or really, it's not really the solving of the problem, is it? It's more of the path we took to solve it. It's not the destination. It's the trip itself that is the interesting part for many of us. And if you're able to, in some cases, really get into and work on some of these very complex problems, you really do have to have some level of interest. You can't be not interested at all in the technology and then somehow make a career on this. I think everybody who gets into a career needs to have some level of interest associated with it. And I think if you want to frame passionate into that particular perspective, I think that's a perfect description of it. The more you're interested in the technology, the more you're interested in how that engine works, the more you want to get into the protocols and the networking and what's really going on under the surface, the more success you will have in this industry. I think that part is relatively true. The people, when I was working at Palo Alto Networks as a systems engineer, that was my last really official corporate job. That was one where I was working with some very highly technical, very knowledgeable people, some cases very intimidating in how much they knew. I worked with people that were just brilliant, that you wonder, why am I in the room with these folks? They know a lot more about this than I do. But then I started to learn the things that they learned, and some of the things I knew I was able to teach to them. And then we started to learn even more. And when you're starting to work with a new technology, and when I was at Palo Alto Networks, this technology was just being introduced. People didn't even think next generation firewalls really worked. So in that scenario, you really did need to be very knowledgeable in the technology and really understand how the engine operated to be able to explain to other people the value of this technology. So Alex is right. Alex, you're spot on. I think having some level of interest in solving the problem and understanding how things work are really important to breaking through at an entry level. And I'll even, as a second follow-up to this, getting that first job in IT can be a challenge. And I think there are different things that we can focus on. A lot of times I'm reading a Reddit post and people say, I've sent out 100 resumes, I've gotten no responses back, or the responses I got back were not high quality responses. But they never talk about doing anything else. They only talk about sending out 100 resumes. What else have they done? Did they go get a formal education? Do they have industry certifications? Do they have a home lab they've been working on and putting other technologies together? Have they built their own Windows server? Have they installed their own firewall? Have they put their own IPS onto their network to see what's going on? And do they know anybody who works in a company that has an IT presence? And have they talked to those people about handing your resume to the IT people or introducing you to the IT people? There are a lot of different strategies you can use to get your foot in the door. It can be on LinkedIn, it could be you building your own things, or it could be a combination of all of those. There is a video in the YouTube video description of this live stream, and it is how to get a job in IT with no experience. It's a 30-minute video I put together that talks about those 4 elements: formal education, industry certification, a home lab or some practical experience, and knowing someone who works there. Those are all the things that I think are your top 4 elements when you're looking to get that first job in IT. And if you're only doing one of those, then you're not doing enough. There are other ways and other strategies you can use. This is a battle. This is a war. You are fighting against everybody else who wants that job. How do you position yourself as being more knowledgeable or someone who's more interested in the position than someone else? It's more than just sending a resume. It may be creating a custom cover letter. It may be customizing the resume itself. It may be adding information about the home lab or talking to your friend who works in a different department to put in a good word for you. All of these things help. It's never any one thing. So I would highly recommend that if you are someone else who is trying to work through and understand where's the best ways to approach solving this problem, I think this is your first big problem to solve, is how do you get that job, that entry-level position in IT? Once you get that first job, it is so much easier to move anywhere else in IT. It really is, because you're already in the door. There's a reason they call it the foot in the door. Once you're inside, it's so much easier. People know that you are a technologist. They know that you've been working and solving these problems. They know that you have an interest in operating systems or Linux or databases or networking or security or cloud or whatever it happens to be. That's what I would recommend you do, is really focus on these types of challenges of approaching getting a job in IT the same way you would approach doing anything else or solving any other kind of problem. You need to work on strategy. And sometimes that's the most important thing you can do. It's, as they say, it's sometimes not just what you know. It's also these other things. It's who you know. It's what you've done. And in some cases, making people aware of that. It's how you market yourself. So another thing to think about for these. This is since we were talking about the changes to Network Plus and that a new Network Plus version will be released in approximately 2 months. Braden asks, have you taken the chance to look at the N10-009 objectives? Are there any major changes CompTIA has made? Well, I have. You can download the objectives. I think you can download the objectives right now, can't you? Let's go out to the CompTIA website and let's see if we can download the latest objectives. They might not be out quite yet, but for partners like myself, we're one of the few platinum partners in the world for CompTIA. They've been so nice to allow us that, and we appreciate what they're doing with those. I get a little bit different access to these course notes than what people might see on the website itself. So if you look at the exam objectives, they even have something here on their website that talks about downloading the objectives. It's right here. Can't see it because of my head. There we go. Get the practice questions and exam objectives. You can fill that out and let me fill it out and see if they're able to give me the latest versions of these. Some of you have probably already done this before. The folks at CompTIA, I do this all the time because I'm always interested in knowing what they have out there. You can see if you do this, that there is an option on this list. Oh, I don't even have to fill it out. They have it right here where they have select exam. There it is. Select 0808009. So you can download the exam objectives from there. And I've downloaded the exam objectives, which is important, by the way. If for someone like me who has to build a new course, we're already working on the new course. We're already well on our way to getting this new course done. So I do have some behind the scenes info I can show you about the N10-009 since you were nice enough to ask. You're getting, I'm not sure I really should show you, but I'm going to anyway. That's kind of a nice precursor, isn't it? Do I really show this? Yeah, I'm going to anyway. I think I can anyway. I have a comparison of the 008 and 009. Can I go full screen on this? Let's see if I can. One moment, please. Thank you for bearing with me. Well, we'll just show it the way it is. I think this is a good way to break this down. Put it like this. There we go. Here it is. Here's a summary of the N10-008 and the N10-009. Nothing like a Venn diagram to really make the day, isn't it? So the big circle here, the yellow circle, mostly yellow circle that you see is the N10-008. The smaller circle is the N10-009. The size of the circle refers to the number of objectives, the number of bullets that are in the exam objectives. So if I go over to the exam objectives, do I have this here? I have a lot of stuff going on, folks. Here we go. So if we go to the N10-008 exam objectives that I happen to have up, each one of these bullets I call an exam objective. So there's a lot of single-lined bullets here. That's what I'm referring to. So the objectives is where we're focusing our efforts. So the N10-008 has 590 bullets. The N10-009 has 430 bullets. So there are 27% fewer objectives. It says SY0601 because I haven't updated this. Then the N10, see, we get to do it in real time. This is the new revision of it. Then the N10-008. So I got to work on these. We're not quite done with this. I told you it was sort of behind the scenes. This is one where if you're starting to work on understanding what you need to study, this is a nice high-level view, I guess, to have this here. So it's a fewer number of objectives. I don't necessarily think that it's really as small as it seems to be. I know it says 27% fewer. I think in the newer objectives, CompTIA has tried to consolidate some of the bullets together, but I don't think it necessarily translates to a smaller exam. I think it really is translating to an easier way to read through the objectives, although in some cases they did get rid of some of the rote memorization. You're welcome to look at both of those to see it. One interesting part of this is 67%, 2/3 of the exam is the same objectives. It's shared objectives between the 008 and 009. But that also means that 300 objectives on the 008 are just gone. They deleted effectively half of the 008 objectives. They're gone completely, which means they had to fill in some new stuff, and they added 140 new topics, new objectives onto the N10-009. So you've got a nice mix there of the same data on both of them. So I think if when we get down to it, obviously the N10-008 is retiring in December. And because of that, some people will need to transition over from the N10-008 to the N10-009. I think it will be a relatively easy transition because 2/3 of the information is shared between both of them. That's really the focus I wanted to have there. So yeah, we always do a nice statistical analysis of what's old, what's new, how much was dropped, how much was added, so that we can get a better feel when we're building out the new course, and really understanding what they are. In the chat room, Taz is asking, as a partner, do they expand on the content they want covered for objectives, especially when listed as a generic point? No, not really. They don't really give us much more than what's there. We do have meetings and webinars, and here's the new one, and we're launching it, and here's our focus, but it's very high level when they talk about this. The objectives themselves, the bullets themselves, they don't really go into a lot of detail. You really have to gather, based on the objectives, what are they trying to tell us? How deep are they really telling us to go based on how the objectives are written? So some of us that have been doing this for a while kind of understand their language, and we get a feel for just how deep we need to go. I think that's the real focus here, is understanding that perspective of it. And I think that in the end, I think if you stick to the objectives, if it's listed, if it's specifically spelled out in the objectives, then obviously they want you to know about that. If it's not listed in the objectives, but it's referenced, there may be a little bit of a gray area there. And you kind of have to look at what's around that bullet to understand how deep they want you to go with those. So we do a little bit of a balancing act when we start building our courses, because obviously we're already building the course. It's not even out yet. Nobody's even seen the exam. So we have to build on our knowledge of how they've talked and discussed these things in the past to be able to understand the type of training we need to provide in the future. So it is a little bit, there's a little bit of some deep thought that has to go into this, but most of it is relatively straightforward. Folks in the chat room are asking the question that people will always ask, of course, which is, okay, so should I just go to the N10-009? Well, it doesn't exist. It's not real. It's not out for another 2 months. So there are people now that will start studying today for their Network Plus. They'll start studying the N10-008, and they will be done before the N10-009 comes out. So if you need your Network Plus certification, start right now, take the N10-008, pass that exam, and keep it moving. Having that certification in your pocket is much more valuable than waiting. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, if you're thinking to yourself, I'll just wait for the new one to come out, everybody who's competing for the same jobs as you, they thank you very, very, very much, because they're going to have their Network Plus certification and you're not doing anything for the next 2 months. Well, if you're not doing anything, why don't you go take the Network Plus certification and earn the cert and put it in your pocket and use it to go get a job. That's how I approach this anyway. I don't think when I look through the exam objectives of what is new, there is not enough new in the new version that would make me want to wait. Because at the end of this, if you take the N10-008 exam and you pass, you are Network Plus certified. If you take the N10-009 exam and pass, you are Network Plus certified. That's the same thing. That's identical. You just earned the same thing. So you waited 2 months, everybody else got their cert and got the job before you did, and at the end of it, you got the same cert they did. There's literally no difference between the two. So that's why I tell people, don't wait. There's no upside. There's literally no upside to waiting. There's all downside. There's nothing to go on. Now, once we get closer to it, let's say we are a week before the N10-008 is to be retired. Okay, well, it's December the 14th. If you ask me on December the 14th, really in November, if you ask me in November the 20th, which one should I study for? I might say, well, there's no reason to start the N10-008. The 009 has been out since June, so that's the one you should take. So I think that's the idea. It's really based around timing more than anything. And I think that's the important part to consider. Get your cert. Do not wait. Never wait to get certified. Never, never, never. That's where I would tell you to focus. The only people really must have the latest version of the exam are really trainers, people who are training to teach that version of the exam. The rest of us, go get what's available. Why wouldn't you go get your certification, put it in your pocket, and use it on your resume? That makes sense to me. Let's do some more questions. Let's see what you have sent in. We're doing great on time. So let's see what you have for me. So folks asking if I'm going to DEF CON. I am not. I'm working on a Network Plus course. So I got stuff to do. Won't be making it to DEF CON this year. I try not to leave the room. We're kind of stuck in our room here. Don't really go anywhere. This is just us. I got things going on. Hopping on a plane. DEF CON's always a lot of fun though. Been to a number of security conferences. Always interesting. Have taught at a few of them. We did some in-map training at CanSec West one year and other things that we worked on. But these days, I try to stay right here and focus on the things that we need to get done so that you can get certified. That's the focus. Other things. This is a good one. It's kind of talks about the exam itself and what to expect on the exam. This question asks, what is the online exam process? Are there cameras observing you? Do you need to share your screen? What is that about? What is going on? This is a fun thing to work on, by the way, if you're someone who is working on these certifications and knowing what to kind of focus your efforts with them. The certifications themselves, like the online exam process, is an interesting one. They do and have the ability to see your screen. They also are very focused on knowing, well, there we go, on seeing and understanding as we work through these issues. The thing that people don't understand is they're watching you the entire time. That's why you have to have a camera on your laptop or a separate camera on your system, because they are watching you very intently during this exam. They want to see everything that you are doing. And so if you are working through this exam, and they're also listening in because there's a microphone, so they're watching and listening to everything. Now, if there's a loud noise, they're going to hear it. If there is someone in the room making noise, they're going to hear that person. So they're constantly watching what you are doing. You have to stay in the camera range. See if I can get rid of some of this things I'm putting there. There we go. You have to stay in the camera range. So if the camera is what we're looking at here, and you're taking your exam and you're like this, I'm going to take the exam. They're going to tell you, send you a message on the screen, you need to be in the camera. We cannot see what you're doing. Oh, okay, sorry. Come over here. How's this? That's fine. You can do that. If you drop something on the floor, you do this, you will get a message on your screen. They'll go, no, can't go down there. Got to stay where we can see you. We are watching you. You can't talk during the exam. So you can't be in your exam. You can't do this. What is the online exam process? Are there cameras observing you? Do you need to share yours? They'll tell you immediately, stop talking. Do not talk to yourself. Now, interestingly, a lot of people don't like that one. That's the one I think people get the most angry about, is they don't allow you to talk on the exam. And that's because there could be a recording device in the room, and you could effectively be disseminating the exam questions into a recording device. Now, interestingly, if you are at a testing center, you also can't talk during the exam. Don't talk during the exam with other people in the exam room. There's no reason to talk to yourself. There's a different problem there. If you must talk to be able to read, we need to fix that problem first. Then we can focus on your certification. So I don't think it's as much of a help as many people believe that it is. You are perfectly capable of talking to yourself inside your head and understanding what is on the screen. There really is no difference. You're hearing the same thing. So you should get more accustomed to doing that anyway. I think that will probably help you professionally. Just an idea of anyone who's working through these. Could be difficult though. So yeah, they're watching you, they're listening, and they're kind of strict in some cases. People have been surprised sometimes because They set up their room. They told everybody, do not come into my room. I'm taking a certification exam. And then somebody will forget or they don't know. And they walk into the room and they walk behind you and they go to the other side of the room and then they walk back and they close the door. Well, they will cancel your exam right there. They'll go, nope, exam's over. You just had somebody else in the room. Can't do that. It's difficult to set up a secure testing environment in someone's home. And that's why it's so strict. And that's why they have such little room for wiggle in there. They're pretty strict. So make sure that you are constantly in the camera, that they have all of these rules are well documented on the Pearson VUE website. You'll be directed over there when you book your exam from the CompTIA website. They will tell you everything. If I had to test with these exams today, I highly recommend, if possible, you go to a testing center. You will have a significantly less impact on these problems. You don't have to worry so much about being in the camera view. You don't have to worry so much about noises around you. You don't have to worry about somebody walking through and your exam being canceled. You don't have to worry about the dogs barking. You don't have to worry about FedEx ringing the doorbell. All you have to worry about is walking into the room, taking the exam, and walking out. But not everybody has access to a testing center. Not everybody lives anywhere near a testing center. Some people live hours away by car. And so in those cases, online testing is fantastic. That is the right answer. That is the thing you should be doing, is doing this testing at your home, because it just makes sense. Just read through the rules, read through people's experiences. Go out to the CompTIA subreddit, which is reddit.com, and search for CompTIA. You'll find the CompTIA subreddit. And a lot of people will put their exam experiences in when they took their exam at home. And they talk about what went well. They talk about what did not go well. And I think if you prepare yourself for that type of situation, you understand what's being expected of you. And you would understand if something happened. Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm not supposed to talk. Oh, that's right. I got to stay in the camera. It's not so much of a concern. But if you weren't prepared and suddenly somebody's yelling at you because you were talking, I didn't realize I was talking. What? I'm not in the camera? What, you can hear me? Then it becomes you're more worried about you instead of taking the exam. And I think that takes away from your ability to successfully complete the exam. So the more prepared you are, the better off you're going to be during the exam. It seems like a no-brainer, but that's something that's a pretty important one to consider. So absolutely be ready. There are very different experiences, and make sure you're prepared for whichever one you choose. We have time for some more questions. Let's keep going through this. Finally, the important questions from Anonymous, who asks, all right, so you passed. Does CompTIA give you the cert right away after passing? You've sat in that room, you took the exam. At the end of the exam, once you have answered all of the questions or you've hit that 90-minute mark, a message will come on the screen saying, are you done with your exam? Would you like to submit this exam? Assuming you have time left. You hit the end the exam, grade my exam. Yes, it's over. I'm done. I'm not going to go back and change any of these questions. I am finished. Go. The first thing that happens is they ask you a survey. It is so frustrating. They literally bring up a survey. Before we show you how you did, because we already know, we've already calculated it. We already know if you passed or not, but we're not going to tell you yet. Instead, we're going to ask you these important questions. Tell us about where you live. Tell us your age. Tell us this. Tell us that. There's some survey questions that you have to go through. You can answer these questions. You can answer them truthfully. You can answer them however you'd like. But you have to answer them before you get the answer that you're hoping to find, which is how you did on the exam. So you have to get through all of those survey questions. Once that's done, it's not very long. It's just a few questions. At the end of this, they present on the screen and they will tell you you were successful, you passed this exam, or they will tell you you did not pass this exam. So you get those results right away. But it doesn't quite yet mean that you are certified. It only means that at this moment, we believe you've made it through and answered the appropriate number of questions to get a passing score. But we have to confirm this. So I would imagine CompTIA has a number of things they go through to validate your score. And some of this is probably automated. Some of this may not be automated. Some of it may have a flag where somebody has to come in and look at it further. But within, they say 24 to 48 hours, you will see a notice. You can log into your CompTIA account and you can track this, and you'll see that you have either passed, it's either pending, or it's now confirmed that you have passed your exam. So you will be able to see that online. Now, if you did not pass your exam, you can go through that same online process and you will get a list of all of the sections where you got a question wrong. So they might, if you got a question wrong on port numbers, it will say section 1.5, understand port numbers, their use, their application, that whole thing that we saw at the title of that section. You got a question, at least one question wrong in that area. They don't tell you how many questions you got wrong in that area, only that you got at least one question wrong. Now, this might help you if you didn't pass the exam. You can now go through this list to be able to grab some additional intel about what sections should I study for next time? Were there certain sections I did better or worse on? So you can start to get a feel for where you might want to study for your next attempt. It's some very good information, and maybe it can give you some insight into places you maybe didn't realize you were quite so weak because you got a lot of questions wrong for that particular section. So I would recommend you do exactly that. If you are needing to go through the exam again, always use that. That used to be a printout. Now it's online. It is a summary of your exam experience. You can also look through that even if you pass the exam. So you may even want to look through and go, wow, I missed that many questions on port numbers. I thought I did well on that. Well, we passed the exam anyway. On to the next thing. At least you have an idea of what to do. But it's all good information to make sure you're familiar with that. It's going to help you as you start working through the exam. Let's get another couple questions in. I know it's top of the hour, so we'll do a little overtime here. Of different things. So this goes back to that video that I mentioned earlier on how to get a job in IT with no experience. Spare Parts asks, what projects would you recommend doing for an entry-level position? I mentioned that if you're going to walk into an interview, it would be good to have some practical experience. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean professional experience, but it means that you have some projects that you've worked on. Maybe it's projects that you did as part of a separate free set of services that you gave to someone else, or maybe in your home lab, you set up a Microsoft Active Directory infrastructure and you build out a Windows server with Active Directory. Maybe you have a separate virtual machine that connected to that Active Directory infrastructure, and you were able to manage that device using the Active Directory features for group policy and some of the other features inside of that. So there's a lot you can do with Active Directory, and telling someone you installed your own Windows server, you set up the DNS so that you could use Active Directory, you set up your own set of Active Directory users and computers, you connected devices to Active Directory, and then you set group policy to manage what people saw when they logged in using that Active Directory information. Now, that's a great project. That will take you all weekend. There will be problems you run into as you start implementing this. Everything you do on this is important. Even the mistakes you make are important. I will tell you, for most people that are installing Active Directory for the first time, the DNS section is a challenge. And you have to make sure that's right if you plan on having devices connect to this Active Directory infrastructure. So many times they'll try to connect a device and it won't work, and they'll find it's a DNS problem, and then they'll fix the problem and everything will be up and running. When you run into that kind of problem and you're scratching your head and you're having to do research and you're changing configurations and you're rebooting and you're seeing if it works now, write all of that down. Put it in a notepad. Make a documentation of that occurring, because during the interview, we've all had this question or heard this question, right? Tell me of a problem you've run into and the process you used to solve the problem. This is a common question in an interview because people want to know about how you solve problems. I mentioned earlier in IT, that's all we do is solve problems. We're just problem solvers. But they want to know, how good of a problem solver are you? And you're able to say, oh boy, I ran into one. The first time I installed Active Directory, let me tell you about a problem I ran into. And now you got 15 minutes of a story about DNS. because after all, it's always DNS. It is always DNS. And that's a perfect story to tell because they probably are familiar with the challenges with DNS and Active Directory. It's something we all run into when we install Active Directory for the first time. In fact, DNS is sort of an ongoing problem, quite honestly, because as I mentioned, it's always DNS. And it's now you talking about a project that you did using virtual machines in your system and connecting another virtual machine and making them talk with each other. You can do all of this with VMs. You can do all of this with downloadable evaluation and or free software from Microsoft. So this is a lot of fun as well. You can really get into Active Directory and play around with it without the fear of breaking anything in a corporate environment. And since it's in a VM, you can take a snapshot, you can do a bunch of things, maybe even break it, and then you can rewind to a previous snapshot and everything's back to the way it was. There's no danger to do it that way. So that's one project. Let me give you another one. And these are mentioned in this video as well. Another good one would be to install a firewall. Maybe you're studying for Security Plus. You're working towards a security role. Maybe there's an open position for an entry level at a security operations center or a SOC. So now you can go in and say, oh yeah, I just installed pfSense, maybe another open source firewall. I installed pfSense on a VM or a separate machine that I had. I set up pfSense to go into my existing internet connection that my family uses, and you won't believe what I saw. And I say that because the first time you connect a firewall into your primary internet connection, it is pretty amazing the things you see. So I'm speaking as a former firewall engineer who went from corporation to corporation to corporation and plugging into their networks. The things that I've seen on corporate networks, you'll walk out of there and you need eye bleach of the things that you see on people's corporate networks. We saw everything. Things that you can imagine, things that you cannot imagine. We have needed to involve law enforcement at times because of the things that we have seen on people's networks. We have walked into a meeting, seen something on a network, had people walk out of the meeting, and before we left the building, people were fired. Rightfully so, I would say, because people do dumb things on a network. So if you can have just a little insight into that with your own network, these are great stories to bring up, because I can guarantee if you're talking to people at a large corporation who have to manage the firewall, they've seen the same things. So these are great stories. These are also stories where you can just talk about what you saw and how you set up this firewall and what it did. And then you loaded snorts so you could do IDS and IPS. And then you started blocking things coming in. And here's a report I created. And would you like to see it? How can you not get that job? How can they not hire you after doing that? I wish more people would have done that when I was a hiring manager. I wish more people would have walked in with stories like this, walked in with projects that they had done. It would have been such an easy decision for me to make. It would have been locked in. You would have had no problem getting that position. Since we're on this topic of projects and going in and talking to people about what they did, there was a great mention of an idea of answering an interview question. This is from Thor, who has a great YouTube channel, the former Blizzard developer. And he was talking about interviews. And he said, they always ask that question at the end of the interview, and rightly so. They ask, well, do you have any questions for us? You know, we've spent all of this time talking about asking you the questions. Now you have a question for us. Okay, what would you like to know about us? And I thought it was pretty interesting, his recommendation. His recommendation is, yes, I do have a question for you. If you hired me right now, where would you see me fitting in your organization? If you were to hire me right now, what job and what types of things would you see me doing for you? That was the question he asked. And what he was getting at with that was that it's a little bit of social engineering. You're changing this from, am I a person that you would want to hire? You're now as we say in the sales business, you're asking for the sale. You're effectively saying, let's say you just hired me. So now you're already getting them to think about, you're already working there. You've now changed this from, should we hire you? Now you're forcing them to think, we've just hired you. What are we going to have you doing? And now you're asking them to answer that question. Not a bad question, really. Not bad. It's a little bit on point, but I think most people will take it at face value because you really are asking it at face value. Hey, if you hired me right now, based on what we've talked about here, where would you see me? What would you see me doing day to day for you? What types of things would you have me working on? Are there certain projects you think I'd be great for if you had me start right now? What would that look like? So that was a pretty good one, I thought. That's one that kind of changed the thought process. And that's what we're trying to do during the interview. And that's the idea I gave you with these projects, is you're now talking to them as if you're working on these projects in their facility, that you're working on technologies they already have. They have firewalls. You just installed one. They have Active Directory. I built my own Active Directory infrastructure. You've already been doing things they know about. And that is what you're trying to do, is keep working through those and understanding what they are. So go out to the Pirate Software web YouTube channel with Thor. He has great stuff, and that was a good one as well. Some other folks in the chat room are asking if my course would be available in other places on the internet. It is not. It's only available on YouTube. It's not going to be behind a paywall. It's not going to be in a third-party pay-for service. I do not have any plans, nor do I ever want to put any of my training courses somewhere where people would not be able to have access to them. So you won't see them on a third-party website. You won't see them as a buy them here. You won't see any of my courses as something that are behind a paywall. Ever, 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 ever. If I have to do that, you'll know that something has gone horribly, horribly, horribly wrong in my brain, and that you should call for somebody important to have a look at me. Have my caretaker come in and see what's going wrong with me if I've done something like that. My intention is to always have my courses, every minute of every video, always available on YouTube for free. That is a foundation of what we do, and I have absolutely no plans to change that ever, 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 ever. So that's the focus. If anybody ever asks me, hey, why don't you put your stuff over on? Nope, not going to do it. Not going to make that happen. That's never going to be a situation for us. You will always find our videos for free, always available, always there. So it just makes sense. And by the way, it's working. For those people that are wondering, does this freemium weird model of putting all of these things out for free and hoping that somehow this comes back? Yeah, it works great. It does. You should do it. You should totally do it. It's fine. You should make that happen. Now, the only problem we have is really just cycles. It's really about time of the day, CPU cycles. My own CPU, this one. That's your only problem, is just making sure you can get everything done. Now, could we scale up? We could. Do I want to? I don't know. I kind of like how we're doing it. I like the focus. I like the quality. And that's one of the things that I think differentiates our products from others that you might run into, is that we have a significant focus on quality. I do not like it when mistakes are made. Today, I made a mistake with one of the questions. It's killing me right now. Do not like that when that happens. And I want all of my videos, all of my courses, all of my books, everything that you would use to train from needs to be the highest quality possible, because there are jobs in people's lives depending on this. And the more you learn, the faster you learn, and the better you learn, the more chance you're going to be able to get that job. And that's our focus. If I had to choose a mission statement, we've all seen these horrible mission statements from corporations before. My mission statement's pretty straightforward. I want you to get a job or better job. That's our mission statement. That's it. So whatever we do, whatever course we create, whatever training materials we have, whatever videos we have, whatever we're working on has to fit that mission statement, which is very straightforward. So if we ever go somewhere outside the scope of that, then we've done something wrong again. And again, you have to call for my caretaker and come have a look at me. I know we are, I think I can fit one more question in. I want to get one more in here before the voice completely goes out. And this one, we were just talking about projects and working on these projects and having devices and figuring out the best way to make yourself marketable and having these stories when you're in an interview. And Eric asks, well, can I set up these projects you're talking about with the VMs and the virtual network connections? And can I do this on a Mac? Because I have a Mac. I don't have Windows. I have a Mac. Can I do it on a Mac? Absolutely. In fact, the screen you are looking at is on a Mac. My entire course that I've created is on a Mac. So all of if you go back and look at my A+ course, there is there's an Active Directory video where I'm running a live Active Directory implementation. I've got devices that are connected to the Active Directory that are all running Windows, all on my screen, all at the same time, and it's all running on Mac OS. But it also works on Linux. You can also do the same thing on Windows. So this is the beauty of virtualization, of course, is it doesn't matter what operating system you're running. If you're on Mac OS, you can go out to VirtualBox and you can download VirtualBox for your operating system, Linux, Mac OS, Windows. You can install it on your local desktop and you can run any operating system you want, practically. Mac OS, if you're in Windows or Linux, the end-user license agreement of Mac OS does not allow you to run Mac OS as a virtual machine. But if you have Mac OS, you're obviously running Mac OS. You can run Linux and Windows on that operating system, and now you're running all three of those at one time on one desktop. They're all talking to each other. They're all integrated with each other. You can set up services and connect to those different services in that virtual world, all for free. You don't need to pay for a thing. Now, at some point, you may find, especially for Mac OS, that you would like to have a more powerful or additional options available that may not be available in VirtualBox. I am on my Mac OS, I run Parallels Desktop specifically. Parallels is the company, Desktop is the product, and it is an exceptional virtualization environment for Mac OS. It integrates perfectly with Mac OS. You may find when you're using VirtualBox that there are, because VirtualBox runs in Windows, Linux, and Mac OS, it doesn't have quite the Mac OS integration that many times we are accustomed to for those of you that are already Mac OS users. There's features of Mac OS that are, for lack of a better word, very elegant. They are integrated. For those of you that run Mac OS, you know it's not just the operating system, it's a whole ecosystem of products all working together. You expect certain things from the operating system that go beyond what you might find on other operating systems, and Parallels Desktop does that for you. It fits that Mac OS issue, that itch that we have to have it really integrate into the OS. So if I had to promote or mention or put a checkbox next to a piece of commercial software that you would use on Mac OS, Parallels Desktop is a very good one. I use it myself and I like it a lot. I also use VirtualBox on Mac OS. I use both. So you may find VirtualBox is all you need. It runs great. Windows runs like a champ. It's so fast. It's a very nice operating system, or as a platform to use to run multiple operating systems. Very, very, very well done. And I think if you are someone who is trying to get familiar with these different operating systems, you're running Mac OS, but a lot of people are going to ask you about Windows. They're going to ask you about running Active Directory. They're going to ask you Windows 11 questions. They're going to ask you Windows 10 questions. You can install all of those operating systems on your Mac OS device, run them in a VM and not worry about any of your data being insecure. You don't have to worry about damaging anything with your Mac OS implementation. It runs in its own little window and you don't have to be concerned about breaking anything. And it's a great way to run it. For those of you watching this, if you have not used VirtualBox before, that's probably where you should start your efforts in building your home lab. Download VirtualBox. That's the first thing you can do. And inside of VirtualBox, if you want to try it out, go download a Linux distribution. Go download Ubuntu. Go download Mint. Go download just a simple entry-level Linux desktop. Download that and install it as a VM. there's your first homework. There's your first lab. If you're running into problems, write down what your problems were and write down how you fix them. And there's your first story. And now you've got something to talk about when you go to the interview, when you're on the Zoom, when you're sitting in the room, and they ask you about a problem you ran into and how you solved it. There's your first story. So now we got something to work on and we can work towards. It's a great thing to think about if you're someone who's trying to figure out, how am I ever going to get this done? How do I ever get to the point of installing Active Directory and getting it all working? You just do it one thing at a time. And eventually, probably pretty quickly, probably relatively surprisingly, you will have this running in short order. And it will be a lot of fun to get there. And then you feel like you can do anything. And you should, because at that point, you really can. You're really just building on those foundational technical topics and building out this home lab with different things that would be interesting. The world is really your oyster there, and you can do everything in a VM on any of these operating systems. It's a great way to get that running. Well, I think that's a great place to stop. I've kind of gone into overtime here. I thank you for your indulgence. We appreciate you being here for the first hour of our study group and the Q&A that we did. And thank you for the great questions in the second hour. We always have a good time talking about technology and the careers and what we're doing in the industry and just interesting things that we've seen online. It's a great way to keep ourselves moving forward towards earning those certifications and getting that job or getting that better job. We want to thank you for joining us. We will be here next week with our Security Plus study group. I'm sure there's going to be great questions there. I say that because I've got to now go and write them. So that's what I will be doing the rest of the day. Thank you so much for joining us. And we will see you next time on the Security Plus, that was Network Plus study group. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you then.